Hello, Anatomy and Physiology Honors. I am here with you guys today to talk about our new unit, Unit 15, on the urinary system. Before we jump into the wonderfulness of your urinary system, you want to make sure you have your new packet. So I've linked it on Plan Book. I'll also make sure and add it to Google Classroom with today's materials. But it looks like this. If you prefer a colored version, you can print the PDF that I've added, even if you have a hard copy already, because you like color and you have a color printer at home. And we're going to just jump into this. I just have this note on here to remind you, if you ever come back to this presentation to get notes, copy at your own pace, do whatever, make sure you always view it in present mode, because things are going to fly in or fly out, and they might cover things up or uncover them. So present mode is the best way to make sure and view everything. All right, let's get into the urinary system. Also, before I do, shout out to my Game of Thrones fans. It's not North Face. You gotta look closely. All right, so we're just going to do a brief overview of our urinary system today. So we're going to just talk about what we find in urine and most of the organs and the major functions of the urinary system. So this is an image, obviously, of many of the organs associated with your urinary system. So your urinary system's in your abdominal cavity, but it's to the very far back side. So last unit with digestive, all of those organs were in the peritoneal cavity in the front. This is all in the back. If you've ever heard of, seen boxers and talk about a kidney shot, it's right here, back of the ribs. That's because your kidneys lay right underneath. You can feel your rib cage, right here. Okay, they are covered up by your rib cage on the back side, a little protected. And so we'll go through and label these things, but this is on the far back side of your abdominal cavity. So these guys are actually already numbered for you. We'll see those same numbers on your homework. So we've got hepatic veins. We talked about the hepatic portal system and circulation. These are the little veins that are branching off. This is my vena cava, the big blue tube coming down here. So that's going to be feeding into our blood system. And the blood vessels here are actually super important because your kidney's all about filtering blood. So a lot of these blood vessels are going to have an important role later. Our esophagus right here is cut. This is the diaphragm, and you can see it sort of poking out. So this is where, your stomach, if it were still there, not removed, it'd be sitting there. The inferior vena cava, okay, our big blue tube coming down here. Number 4, sitting right on top of my kidneys, is the adrenal glands, a little triangle hat that sits on top of them. Our abdominal aorta is this large red vessel coming down. It's got its other branches coming off as well. The ileum, this word sounds familiar to you. That's because it's a bone. It's the kind of the hip bone, the little flared part kind of on the back. If you put your hands on your hips towards the backside, you're touching the ileum, part of your pelvic bone. So if you're thinking of the location of your kidneys, it's basically in this space right above the ileum. And so hard to see, but my hand's kind of placed right where those kidneys would be. My rib cage comes down, my ileum comes up to try to protect these important organs. But when we talk about a kidney shot, there's a little bit of empty space where there's no bone, and so sometimes boxers can get a jab in there and make someone urinate out blood. All right, so here is the end of my digestive tract. It's been cut as well, so you can kind of see the beginning and the end of the digestive tract here. That's the rectum. And then we have here the uterus. So this would be a female because there's a uterus, not a guy. And I want to back up. 14, these aren't going to fall in this order, but 14 is the urinary bladder. Gentlemen, I want you to pay close attention here. Us ladies, we have our urinary bladder, and sitting right on top of it is our reproductive organ, the uterus, okay? When we are going on road trips and your sister, your mom, your girlfriend, your future wife has to stop more often than you do to go to the bathroom, it is because we have an organ sitting on top of our bladder. You gentlemen have nothing. It's just this kind of open space. There's nothing sitting on top of us, but on top of it. But us ladies, we have a uterus sitting on top of it. So the amount when our bladder fills, when it expands, it can only expand so much. This is even worse so for pregnant women because that uterus has a big old baby in it. And so this is why women who are pregnant have to pee so often. It's because there's like hardly any room for that bladder to expand because that uterus is sitting right on top of that bladder, causing pregnant women to have to urinate often and frequently because there's just no room for the bladder to go. All right, fun social lesson for you. Okay, number 9, moving over here, we're getting into some important blood vessels. So the renal artery is the blood that comes into the kidney. That will be important later. The 10 right here, the renal hilum, or sometimes called the hilus, it is just this little section of the indentation of the kidney. So our kidney kind of has this little bean shape to it. So it's sort of like this little curve where these arteries and veins are coming in and out. Speaking of veins, the renal vein is the one moving out. If you haven't figured out already, renal is referring to kidney. So you're going to see that word a whole lot in this unit. So the renal artery is the kidney artery, renal vein is the kidney vein. 12 is the star of the show in this unit, the kidney. We're going to get into good detail about them. And then this tube coming off of the kidney is called the ureter, and we have 2, one coming off of each kidney. Urine is produced in the kidney, and it's a complicated process we'll get through. And then it's transferred down the ureter and then eventually ends up in the bladder, the urinary bladder. This is where the urine is stored before you are ready to relieve your body of the urine you have produced through number 15, the urethra, whatever that is. There we go. All right. So those are the basic organs and structures, and then a few other organs just for reference on it. So in your packet, we're going to be here on page 9. Yep. Just going over these organs in slightly more detail. So starting up here, our kidney is the main major organ of our urinary system. And the nice thing about the urinary system is there's not a lot of organs to know. The digestive tract had a ton, right? But the urinary system is just kidneys, ureters, urinary bladder, and urethra. That's it. 2 of which are tubes, 1 of which is just a big storage thing. The kidney, though, is a pretty complicated unit. And so we're going to spend the majority of our time talking about kidney structure. So the location of this, as I mentioned, it was in the back of the abdominal cavity. We call that retroperitoneal. So the peritoneum is the front part of your abdomen. Retroperitoneal is in the back. Okay, old school retro, it's like back in time. Okay, it's on the back side of the abdominal cavity. So it's located behind the parietal peritoneum. So I just want to show you a picture here of this. You are looking at a cross section of the abdomen. So this is going through the kidneys. So here's my kidneys here. This whole thing in yellow is where all of those abdominal organs were that we talked about in the last unit. So all of my small intestine, large intestine, all of that good stuff. You can see the blood vessels. This is the vertebrae of my spinal cord right here. So that's the posterior side, the little bony back part, spinal cord. The kidneys are pretty far back. This is just trying to show, I believe, like fat and then the muscle, the back side of your muscle wall. There's fat surrounding our kidneys, a lot of fascia holding it in place as well. So this kind of gives you a different view of it, but it's on the back side, retroperitoneal. The sun is coming in hot. All right, so our basic unit, I'm gonna have to move a little. Our basic unit inside the kidney, sorry, Norman, I'm blocking you. is called the nephron. And we are going to talk a lot about the nephron when we talk about the structure of the kidneys. The nephron is really important in how we filter out the good from the bad. That's the whole function of our kidney, is to keep the good stuff in our bloodstream and get the waste products out, right? And so the nephron is super key, and we're going to talk a lot about that. The ureters, like I said, just connect the kidneys to the bladder. And just like peristalsis, this rhythmic muscle contraction, squeezing, is what moved food through my digestive tract. Peristalsis also moves urine from my kidneys into my bladder. And so it's this little squeezing action that happens. My urinary bladder is just the storage, the holding unit for that urine. And throwback to our tissues chapter, the type of tissue we find in there is transitional epithelium. Transitional epithelium. And if you remember, that epithelial tissue was multi-layered or stratified, but it was really odd shaped because it was the stretchy one. And so it will move from being relaxed and everything being sort of kind of bold, like thicker cells. And then when it stretches out, those things get cell and they almost look a little more squamous. So transitional epithelial. And then lastly, your urethra is the tube that allows urine to move from the bladder out of the body. We, who are potty trained individuals, have control over the sphincter muscles of our urethra by relaxing it. It allows urine to leave the body, and you can relieve yourself and empty your bladder when you feel that need and urge. Males and females, though, our urethras are different because of our reproductive organs. Males have a longer urethra because their urethra has to pass through the penis. So it is approximately 8 inches. Now this extends from inside the body to outside. And females is roughly 1.5 inches. So really short, okay, for a female. Females tend to get urinary tract infections way more easily than men. And the reason is bacteria move up the urethra. This is what causes it, and can settle in the bladder, and it causes painful urination and other uncomfortable symptoms. The reason why females are more prone to this is because that bacteria has a short distance to travel before it gets up into the bladder. Males have further, and their urethra is a lot better at defending itself from bacteria. Now, gentlemen's urethra share common structures with the reproductive organs, which we'll get into later. So the urethra for males is shared. Females, it is not. Okay? It is just an exit tube for urine and nothing else. So something to look forward to. That's our next unit, you guys. Reproductive system. All right. So we're going to go over the functions also here of our urinary system. So this is on page 10, the last little flow chart here, the back side. There's two main functions. Now you can see that homeostasis. We want to maintain a balanced, stable environment in our body. And then the other function is to get rid of waste. So we produce, as we are living our life, harmful things all the time, just in regular cell metabolism. And because of us building things for our body, building muscles and nucleic acids and breaking down carbohydrates and doing cell respiration, we end up producing a lot of waste. And if those wastes stayed in our bloodstream and in our cells, it would basically poison ourselves. So the job and the role of the kidneys is to filter out the bad. We urinate out the bad. We keep the good. We want to keep stuff like water, some salts, not all of them necessarily. We want to keep the sugars, especially. We love glucose in our body. We don't want to urinate that stuff out, but we want to get rid of the bad stuff. And all of the blood goes through the kidneys, and so it has a very important function of how do we get the good out and how do we get the bad out and keep the good in? And so that's going to be the focus of this unit. All right, so what do we get rid of? What are we trying to get out of? So another word for those wastes is called nitrogenous. are nitrogenous wastes. These are nitrogen-based wastes. We've mentioned this in previous units, especially at the beginning of the year. These are the wastes I make. This is not the same thing as the feces waste. Feces is just food I didn't use, and it never was like truly in my cells. Urine you make. This is your products that were harmful for your body that you're excreting. All right, so we have ammonia and urea are kind of similar in nature. Both of these are waste products from protein metabolism. So as we metabolize our proteins, these are byproducts of building proteins in my body. That action ends up producing these. Uric acid is a byproduct of nucleic acid metabolism. So when I make my DNA and my RNA, this is a byproduct of it, and it's harmful for my body, so I have to excrete uric acid. And then creatine, excess creatine in my body is a byproduct of muscle metabolism. Now, we talked about creatine phosphate. It was an important molecule to help with your muscle contractions, especially like athletes and things like that. Weightlifters might take creatine to help give them more energy when they're weightlifting. But excess creatine, our bodies excrete, we will urinate that out. So when we think about urine, what's in urine, it's going to be all of these things. So this is going to be what we find in urine, among a few others, which we'll get into. So it excretes waste, and it also needs to regulate homeostasis in our body. So these are all of the different things that it does to maintain homeostasis. So one thing is water balance. You didn't drink very much water today, your urine's going to be darker and you're going to produce less urine. You drank a ton of water today, your urinary system is going to be producing and excreting out a lot of excess water. So it's just there to keep a nice balance for you. We call this osmoregulation. Osmoregulation, just maintaining balance of our water in our body. Our acid and base balance is another thing that it's going to regulate. So your pH of your body, blood is a little too acidic. Okay, it's going to get out excess hydrogen ions of your body. It's a little too basic. It's going to get rid of excess hydroxide, OH ions. And so it's going to keep your bloodstream at that right pH. It's going to help maintain blood pressure. This is actually super duper important. If you can recall when we talked about hormones, there was an important hormone that the kidneys produced in order to help maintain blood pressure. And it was kind of an argument between your heart and your kidneys. Your heart doesn't want too high of blood pressure because it knows it strains and stresses the blood vessels in and around the heart. But your kidneys like high blood pressure because it needs high blood pressure to filter. We need pressure in order to do filtration. And so there's always sort of this back and forth between the hormones that your heart produces and your kidneys produce. And that hormone was renin. So renin hormone is going to help control that blood pressure in my body. All right, and then it also is going to activate vitamin D. It was a beautiful sunny day this week. I'm sitting a little in my morning sunshine here, and we've got activating vitamin D. Your kidneys have an important role in that, which we'll get into. We also have hematopoietin. If you remember, this is the process of when we're making our red blood cells. This is another one of those hormones that is produced to encourage red blood cell production. All of the blood of your body is going to go through your kidneys at some point, and so your kidneys sort of do a check on how your blood is doing as well. And then lastly, your electrolyte balance. We're going to talk a lot about salts going in and out, what gets reabsorbed, what gets excreted, excess ions, salts, and that whole balance. Okay. That gives you a quick overview of our urinary system and the organs. We're going to jump into kidney structure on Friday. I hope you guys have an awesome day and keep up all the great work you guys are doing in this online school. Talk to you later.